instead of a tackle. Now turns on the Jets. Up to the 30, the 20, 10, 5. Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
28-yard play. Jets body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move, Byron Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
4 on third down so far. A little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty. Give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to fit it in. Royals. It does. Royals stays up. The show's off his 4-3 wheels. Incredible effort for Royals.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to episode 31 of the G5 Hive, where we aim to bring you all the honey in G5 college football. I am your host, Justice. I am joined with my co-host, Luke. How you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing all right. How are you? How are you? How are you? Had a hard time with words tonight, I guess.
I am doing well, man. You know, it's a lot of basketball this past weekend with March Madness. So I always enjoy watching that. Great stuff. A lot of upsets. The Iowa women look pretty good on the women's side. You know, they I guess they're headed for a showdown with LSU. I think.
Yep.
At some point that ought to be real interesting.
Yeah, that's on the docket there. The women put together quite the big route this weekend, but it was kind of not with the drama that kind of comes with it of the refs and Caitlin Clark's dad just telling her to shut up and quit complaining.
I saw that.
All sorts of things. So, now, there, if you search X, there are some people that are trying to make her kind of the villain now. I guess we would say the Angel Reese of college basketball.
Yep. So yeah, great stuff, man. College football, college basketball, winding down. Spring games are getting ready to come very rapidly. Spring practice is in full swing. So yeah, just a great time in college sports. Great lead for our Worker Bee series. We've released 2 episodes so far, Hawaii and Liberty. If you haven't, definitely encourage you to go check those out. We will have a new episode dropping this Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern, Friday morning. And we're working every day to add more and more teams. We're almost close to 50, I think. Not quite there, of the 64 teams. So we're going to be really, really busy here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yep. And we got a couple independents that will be joining us. So, I mean, I think that puts us over the 50, but I guess you want to call it the blue bloods of the G5. I think we're sitting at 49. So we're really close and trying to get you all of those G5 teams. But for year one, I would call this pretty successful.
Oh, it's beyond my expectations for sure. And some schools, once again, the MAC is just, man, the MAC is so tough. Like it's hard. It's like it seems like some student newspapers don't even follow. Don't even write stuff about their sports team. So, yeah, man, MAC's really hard. Doubt we're gonna get all 64, but hey, we're working every day, trying to add more and more. We do have some news and notes this week, and something I feel like I haven't done a great job of in the past in terms of like telling you where we're getting this information from, crediting those sources. So I'm going to try and do a better job of that. So I read an article from Ed Daniels, a beat reporter, Crescent City Sports, talking about Tulane And in this article, there was one statement I felt like was worthy of sharing. And it says, wide receiver Mario Williams is going to be a difference maker. He can separate and is very good at making yards after the catch. If you've kind of seen Mario Williams in the past, that's no really surprise, especially his time there at Oklahoma. But just kind of great to see, like, he's showing these things at Tulane, and definitely someone to have on our radar moving forward in that Tulane offense. Trent Wood, beat reporter for the Deseret News, talking about Utah State. And he's talking about the quarterbacks. They have Cooper Lagasse, McKay Hillstead, Bryson Barnes, and Spencer Petros. Barnes and Petros have done nothing but impress since arriving on campus this winter, with Utah State head coach and quarterback coach Blake Anderson singing their praises. They're in the building all day, every day, Anderson said in early February. Both Bryson and Spence are here every day watching tape, going on the board, signals. They're already throwing a bit with the guys. Lagasse, though, has taken on nearly every challenge possible during his Aggie career, including multiple benchings last season in favor of then true freshman McKay Hillstead, only to come out as the Aggies starting quarterback. And Anderson has had nothing but positive things to say of Hillstead since he signed with Utah State and the prized commit in the 2023 class. The former Skyridge High standout has Anderson's faith. Anderson says it's going to be extremely competitive room. We told them all the same thing, and they've all acted how I expected. They've come and worked hard every day, already preparing at a high level. I cannot wait to get in there with the QB room this spring and on the field and really have what I think is going to be a heavyweight battle in terms of the quarterback room. It's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely that's an offense where the quarterback is valuable for our fantasy purposes. So definitely a battle to pay attention to.
And then I don't know. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about Utah State because we got a little tidbit over the weekend. I think it was Friday. I'm not sure when the tidbit.
I think it was late last week.
That kind of talked about Micah Davis, who is a Iowa Western community college guy turned Air Force turned Utah State. And that he's pretty darn good, but he's sitting out this spring after a foot surgery. I think
he had a foot injury and then had surgery. I think like near the end of the season last year.
So that's just something to note in his development this year. And then there's been a lot of hype around Freeman, but based on the reports,
Robert Freeman, junior college transfer.
Yep, Robert Freeman, but there's he's running with a fourth team, but he did stress it is early. So, how much do you expect somebody to pick up, right from joining a team? They're not going to just put him right up at the top. But the thing that was interesting here was mention that sophomore Grant Page and senior slot, Kyrese White, have taken some nice steps forward from last year. So maybe a couple names to just file away, Grant Page and more so senior slot Kyrese White. And that's probably a name to just make sure you're familiar with, got in your back pocket. And I'm going to step away quick because my dog's freaking out and I have no idea what's going on. So I'll be back.
Yeah. So, JUCO transfer All-American Robert Freeman comes to Utah State. He's been getting a lot of hype recently. He's a slot receiver. He's a small guy, kind of fits that mold of a Devin Tompkins and a Terrell Vaughn. Just like I said, at this point, if you're drafting now, is he worth the flyer? Absolutely. But I can see the hype train already left the building, and I can see his capital getting a little too rich, possibly, at least at this point in the game. So just kind of temper those expectations. Doesn't mean he's not going to be a star. I guess at this point we just don't know. So just kind of be aware of that situation. Moving on to the Ohio Bobcats. And their athletic department released a spring practice report, and head coach Tim Albin talking about the two quarterbacks, C.J. Harris and Parker Navarro. Right now, we're splitting the first team reps evenly. I haven't watched the film yet, but that's what it looks like on the script from today's practice. We think it will be even, and it's going to be a great competition. Both C.J. Harris and Parker Navarro are bowl-winning quarterbacks. C.J. Harris 2 years ago, Parker Navarro this past year. C.J. Harris is healthy. He's back, so it'll be a great battle between the two of them to kind of see who's going to lead the Ohio Bobcats moving into 2024. Brett Bloomquist, a beat reporter for the El Paso Times, talking about UTEP, and he's talking about the quarterback competition there, and there's 7 quarterbacks in camp, and he goes and talks about all of them. But the meaningful part I found there was that the 2 quarterbacks taking the first team reps at that point in time were Cade McConnell and Skylar Locklear. Skylar Locklear is important to remember because he is a transfer over from Austin Peay. So he followed that coaching staff over. Clearly, he's going to have a leg up just from knowing the offense because he's been in the offense with them previously. He was not the starter at Austin Peay last year. So definitely an interesting battle to watch there for UTEP. Moving on to Fresno State and Jackson Moore for 24/7. He says that Jalen Moss is still working in the slot, but wide receiver Emory Edwards has been rotating outside with Mac Delina and Josiah Freeman. So just some wide receiver news there. Craig Stevenson, the beat reporter at AL.com, talking about South Alabama. He says the Gio Lopez era begins. Sophomore Bishop Davenport, a Utah State transfer, and true freshman Jared Hollins are also around for the spring, but Lopez goes into the spring as the front runner. A couple episodes ago, we talked about this with Kef for College Football News. He was he had released his rankings of the top Sun Belt quarterbacks, and he ranked Bishop Davenport for South Alabama, and I guess he assumed Davenport would be the winner there. But I mean, I'm not sure why he said that, what his reasoning was, but we talked about at that point in time, it was pretty clear to us that Gio Lopez is kind of the next man up for South Alabama. He performed well last year when he was called upon, and he brings a different dynamic to that South Alabama offense that Carter Bradley did not bring. He's pretty mobile, running quarterback, so he can do some damage with his legs, which is an aspect that Carter Bradley really didn't bring to that Jaguar offense. Staying with the South Alabama Jaguars, an interesting note in this article talking about the running backs. And, there's been much debate about who's going to be leading that running back room. But according to Craig Stevenson, he's saying sophomore running back Braylon McReynolds steps in as the number 1 running back. Having been limited to 5 games by a broken collarbone in 2023, the versatile and reliable mobile native will now be one of the offense's focal points, although junior Kentrell Bullock should also get plenty of touches. So that's definitely a departure from the way we had been operating. We had, kind of assumed it was going to be Kentrell Bullock. And I think other people were, kind of beating that drum for Braylon McReynolds in terms of, hey, man, what about this guy? He kind of got the run towards the end of the year. Well, now we know why, right? He had missed the beginning of the year with the injury with the broken collarbone. And he is a little bit on the smaller side, so that's another concern for McReynolds. But Craig Stevenson seems to think that McReynolds is going to be the 1A, I guess, to the 1B of Kentrell Bullock. The wide receivers out there at South Alabama, he says former walk-on Jamal Pritchett emerged as a serious receiving threat in 2023 and will take on an even bigger role now that Colin Lacey has gone via the portal off to Louisville, and senior Devin Vosen is still recovering from his ACL and knee surgery that cost him the most of last season. he says that Pritchett is a little undersized at only 5'9", 172 pounds, but he really can stretch the field and make those tough catches in traffic. I think we might have mentioned this last week when we talked about Jamal Pritchett in the draft. That some people are forgetting about Devin Vosen, but he does come back, and he's still recovering from that knee surgery. So you just kind of pay attention to see how Devin Vosen, how he looks when he does get back on the field.
All right, I'm back. Sounds like I missed some little South Alabama talk. And Vosen coming back from an ACL, it's just something that, from a fantasy football standpoint, I kind of like to avoid, because I feel like, and I may have mentioned this the last time we talked about it, but it seems like then there's a hamstring issue on the opposite side. So whatever, knee he had that injury on, then I would kind of expect, hey, you might have some nagging hamstring issues that may develop, because it's kind of the whole like compensating for whatever weakness you have, because obviously you want to get ready to go for football season, and if you push it, then you're going to just have compensating for that knee on the other side. So one of those things that I pay attention to, and depending on price, everything is price dependent. Don't hate players, just hate players' prices. Maybe a guy that I'm not taking, but again, one of those things, kind of forgot that he was coming back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting talking about the running backs there with that news that the beat reporter expects Braylon McReynolds to be the RB1. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts folks' thoughts, and if we definitely see a switch there between him and Kentrell Bullock in terms of who folks really covet more.
Yeah, Bullock is going pretty high in drafts overall.
And McReynolds is going fairly low, towards the end of drafts. So, and like I said, I guess I don't know. To me, like, I don't know that McReynolds can withstand a LaDainian Webb type workload just because of his size. So I feel like if he's going to be like the 1A, it's definitely going to be a 1A, 1B kind of thing between him and Kentrell Bullock. I mean, I could be wrong. I just don't see a world where McReynolds is like getting all the love there at running back. But Craig Stevenson seems to think it's going to be more a 1A kind of 1B kind of situation there at South Alabama. Luke, you want to take us into the spring practice dates and games we have coming up in the near future?
I sure do. All right. So spring games coming up on April 6th. We've got Navy. They practice, and practice doesn't end until April 12th. Then North Texas, UNLV, Toledo, Southern Miss, and UAB all have games on April 6th. Then practice started for UAB on the 19th of March. Georgia Southern, March 19th. UConn, Independent, started March 19th. Kennesaw State, newly minted G5, Kennesaw State started March 20th. Northern Illinois started March 25th today. UMass and Wyoming start tomorrow. And then just for some clarification purposes, was able to get confirmation on two teams not having a spring game, Coastal Carolina and Central Michigan. But they both wrap up practice April 13th. So wrapping up, and it'll be when we do our sit down with these teams, that'll be a question that I will be curious about as to maybe why there isn't a spring game. We'll obviously do the deep dive into the teams themselves. Maybe there's some guys coming back from surgery that we find out, or they just didn't have enough depth because of surgeries or transfers or whatever. Yeah, those are always one of those things that ever since Brian from Hawaii mentioned, like, Yeah, we normally don't go this early. They went early last year because of the stadium renovation, and then kind of kept it this year. But then it sounds like next year we'll go back to their traditional timing, like kind of with everybody else. But you get to that bowl season, and you can kind of tell who's in it, who's not, with who's getting surgery, who's not getting surgery. Um, hey, we want you ready for this time. Hey, we're gonna play. You're gonna play through this type thing. So I think that's really telling too, is when practices start / spring games happen or don't happen.
I mean, the Navy thing's kind of interesting, right? Because they're having the spring game roughly a week before they end practice. Usually, kind of the spring game kind of culminates the end of practice. I would say it's not completely unusual. I think you've seen other teams kind of do something similar, but just kind of interesting. Um, and why teams don't do it, I get why they don't play like a quote game, but like why they wouldn't have like a spring showcase, if you will, just kind of get their fans involved. It's good, good outreach for their fans and getting people interested in football. Yeah, I'm not sure what the downside is to at least doing that, other than if the weather's crappy, right? I mean, crappy weather is not, it's just not gonna make for a good turnout. But other than that, I don't really know why they wouldn't. All right, moving on to our main topic for this week. We're going to continue breaking down this G5 only mock draft. It's a 12-team mock draft, only taking folks from the G5. We included the independents as well. We also included Washington State and Oregon State because they're kind of in no man's land. So we did include them as well in this draft. Once again, thanks to Andrew Katz, Brock, CFF Jared, Clint Carlson, Steve Jackson, Rebel Way, Corey Cavender, PJ, Brett Pogny, and Dwight Peebles for participating in this draft. Last week we went through rounds 1 through 5. Tonight we're going to start with rounds 6 through 10. You're on mute, Luke.
All right, starting off great. So rounds 6 through 10, we'll start off in round 6. PJ takes Georgia State running back Freddie Brock. Then we've got Giovanni Lopez there at pick 2. Jalen Moss, Nick Nash, Krishan McCray, Kavarian Barnes, John Gentry, Von Blue, Cam Camper, Jaquiz Stewart, Elijah Metcalf, and Braden Fowler Nicolosi. Thoughts here on round 6?
Some great quarterbacks there with Gio Lopez and Braden Fowler Nicolosi. Like those two guys, and and pretty much in any league. I'd say if I didn't like a pick this round, probably Freddie Brock. Freddie Brock had the good bowl game there for Georgia State, but I'm just not sure Georgia State's going to be that great this year. They lost a ton of production. Folks graduating, moving on, folks going through the portal, and I'm not. And they bring in a new head coach, right? They lost their head coach in the middle of spring practice, basically. Got a new head coach, and so he can look at things differently, right? So I'm just not really sure that I personally would have much Freddie Brock at this point in time. Love the Jalen Moss pick. As we said, he's going to be the guy in the slot. Nick Nash, we don't really know what to make of him at this point, right?
Yep.
We don't know if he's going to be, we don't know who the outside receiver is going to be for San Jose State. That's typically the receivers you want to target in a Craig Stutzman offense. But Nick Nash has been primarily outside. Love Krishan McCray. The big issue with him is injury, right? He got injured towards the, I don't know, not quite the end. I want to say maybe like game like 8 or 9, I feel like, for Kent State. but when he was on the field, they were feeding him. So assuming he can come back healthy, he looks to be the leading receiver again for Kent State.
He was kind of the one bright spot that Kent State did have.
Yes,
and then
absolutely.
when he went down, that it kind of everything went. But it's interesting. The pick that you really liked was the pick that you made. So I find that interesting.
That's not the one I like the best. I would say the picks I like the best were probably Lopez, Jalen Moss, and Braden Fowler Nicolosi. Those three I probably like the best in this round.
I like the Elijah Metcalf pick because we talked about it. That offense and what it's going to look like this next year. He's kind of that safe floor. You would think. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns there with Marshall, but it has a lot of potential. And maybe this isn't the year for Marshall. Maybe it's next year. But again, I don't remember how the teams. I could go back and look at exactly where it is. But like, if you have Elijah Metcalf as your wide receiver 3 or a flex guy, I feel really, really good about that, especially in a 1 PPR league.
What do you think of that kind of those 4 running backs? Yeah, I was gonna say between Kavorian Barnes, John Gentry, Vaughn Blue, and Jacquez Stewart. Like the first thing that jumps out at me is, hey, running, and then we had Freddie Brock too. Like here we are in round 6, and we're kind of already like looking at guys that might be backup running backs. And so it just kind of shows, I feel like, how shallow running back, known commodities.
He'll start, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, he's like last year was in a committee, right?
Yeah,
wasn't like he was, the end all be all. They kind of rotated there. So my point is, like, we've kind of reached this point in the draft where there's not a lot of what I would say great options left at running back.
Yeah, for sure. And then Vaughn Blue, that was my pick. And it was just kind of one of those things. Like right now he's dealing with a shoulder injury, having a hard time just staying healthy, which is a hard time to get on the field when you're struggling just to be healthy. But hey, if somebody does get hurt, it's kind of, I would want a running back in that Liberty offense.
Yeah.
Especially if it's going to be that 1A, 1B type thing that Sea of Red spoke about.
Yeah, Jacquez Stewart. I think Jacquez Stewart's. I like that pick there. Toledo running backs have been good in the past. The only thing about Stewart is I just don't know they ever see him as a workhorse, right? I mean, he's a guy that's going to get 10, 12 carries a game. I don't know that they see him as the guy that's going to get 25, 30 carries a game. But maybe they will this year just because they don't have much else in terms of running back there at Toledo with Penny Boone moving over to Louisville.
And then like the Cam Camper pick, like I like it when he's healthy. There's this 6th round is a lot of what ifs type thing.
Yeah. I mean, Boise State with Chris Marshall, Prince Straken still there. It'd be interesting to kind of see who's going to lead that room.
And then John Gentry, I think is a solid pick. Like he'd be a great RB2 for your team. He doesn't like his volume wise is kind of in that 12 to 18 area, which is pretty good. He also gets a lot of targets. So just like I'll read his last few games here between October 18th and November 25th, but he had 5 receptions on 5 targets, 4 receptions on 5 targets, 4 receptions on 4 targets, 3 receptions on 4 targets, and 7 receptions on 9 targets. And they're not a whole bunch of yardage. It's a lot of dump offs and whatnot, but in full point PPR league, that's all you care about, I guess, is catches here and there. So I think that's and Sam Houston really struggled to get some wins last year. I think they ended up with 2, maybe it was just 1.
They were
I feel
competitive
like
in
they're
most of
like
their games. They just could never kind of get over the hump, so to speak.
But here are the last 5 fantasy point outputs from him, which I want to just highlight this because I feel like John Gentry really wasn't on a lot of people's fantasy radars, or people may not know him very much, especially because Sam Houston was new last year. But he finished the season. I'll start November 25th and work back. 18.2, 20.9, 8.8, 24.5, 13.5. You feel pretty good about that from your RB2 if you get a couple, 20-point games here. If you're,
Absolutely.
he's got that dud of an 8.8, but, if you're can get like 12 points, 14 points from your RB2, most weeks you're going to be pretty happy with that.
All right, let's move on to round 7 here.
All right, round 7. It starts off with EJ Warner, quarterback Rice, Nicholas Vadiato, quarterback Middle Tennessee, then Josiah Friedman, wide receiver Fresno State, Landon Ransom, wide receiver Rice, Jacob Zeno, quarterback UAB, Rodriguez Clark, running back Southern Miss, Lee Beebe, running back UAB, Jace Bauer, quarterback Sam Houston, Dylan Carson, running back Air Force, Deion Hankins, wide receiver Texas State, John Mattier, quarterback Washington State, and then Tyson Mobley, wide receiver Liberty.
I guess if I had my favorite picks this round, I would say probably EJ Warner and Rodriguez Clark. I think a lot of people forget about Rodriguez Clark. I think some people thought he was out of eligibility. But no, he is returning. He is on their spring roster, and they don't have a lot behind him. I think Kenyon Clay and then a true freshman behind him. So if he looks the heir apparent to Frank Gore Jr., so definitely someone I think that's being underdrafted currently. EJ Warner, he was great at Temple. We saw what JT Daniels could do last year at Rice when he was healthy. I think Warner can do even more. So those are probably the 2 picks that I like the most. If I'm picking one that maybe I don't like so much, maybe Hankins at Texas State. He does have
At
dual.
that point, this is our wide receiver 3 from Texas
Well, Hankins
State
has dual
taken in
eligibility, right? He's a running back / receiver, I think, in Fantrax. But I just don't know. I don't know if there's going to be enough balls around, going around for Deion Hankins to do a whole lot there at Texas State.
I'm just meaning Texas State has in our draft wise, he would be the the third guy that would have been taken, and then already had McLeod go. So again,
and
Texas
Mahdi
State
already
went.
went.
One of those. Yeah. So that offense people seem to want a piece of.
Which I can't blame him, right? It's probably going to be one of the higher scoring offenses in college football in 2024.
The one that I'm most nervous about in here is probably Nicholas Vadiato. He had a great year last year, but then that whole coaching staff leaves. So what does that really mean for Middle Tennessee? And if you have Metcalf leaving to go to Marshall, did he see something? Sometimes you like to think that these kids make really informative decisions. Sometimes they don't. But what did he see that he decided? Because he was heavily targeted there. He was, why would you leave unless maybe you're like, hey, this is kind of what we plan on doing, and I don't want to be a part of that. And I'll go to Marshall where there's a lot more unknowns. I mean, it's again not a brand new coaching staff, but a new offensive coordinator. So, and not a lot of returning production, I guess, there at Marshall. A lot of people leave. So that's something
much more
that
wide open offense, though, right? With Tennessee State bringing in Derek Mason.
Yeah. So that's something that sticks out to me. And then The hot name, I think, right now of the offseason is Lee Beebe. Getting a lot of talk around, even some chats that I'm in that aren't super centric on CFF guys, that are more on Devi guys. Like, they're even talking about Lee Beebe, and I'm like, what? Like, where's this coming from? Like, you guys should not be talking about Lee Beebe, but you are. Don't, like, this hype seems to have been, gotten way out of control. But if you guys are not familiar, Jacobs, brother of Josh Jacobs, plays there at UAB, and he had a knee
Isaiah.
injury, I believe. And that was towards the end of the season. So I don't envision that he'll be ready. Like, people are talking like he might come back. I just not sure that he will. And kind of UAB in this Dilfer offense threw the ball a lot more. And, I took Jacob Zeno in this round, and I'm just hoping it's more of the same of throwing the ball.
Yeah, my pick, Chase Bauer. I like what he can do with his legs. Mobile quarterback. I think he can help elevate this Sam Houston offense. I feel like last year the offense kind of was the one holding the thing holding them back. But Chase Bauer, I think, is an upgrade compared to Keegan Shoemaker, and so I'm excited what he can do for them. And they might need to score a little bit more this year. Their defense was really good last year, but they lose quite a bit on that defense. So I'm thinking that this year they're going to have to be a little bit more aggressive on offense and score more in order to put themselves in positions to win. And I think Chase Bauer can be a big part of that.
What do you take of, just the G5 versus, I'll call it the P5 here in Washington State quarterback play? You've got John Mattier going here in the 7th round. When this is like my favorite part of fantasy football for college, of how many G5 quarterbacks were taken above a P5 quarterback. Like, what are your kind of thoughts there in Washington State and that quarterback room?
I mean, it's if he's going to be the starter, that's probably a steal, right? In that Ben Arbuckle offense there. I think it's a great pick. Definitely worth the risk at this point. I'm assuming that's probably Clint's QB2, and so high upside for sure. High upside pick.
I'll try to find Clint's roster here and look at that. And then Tyson Mobley taken here, the last pick in the round. I would have to look at the timing. Was this right when the spring game happened?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I think the spring game had already happened because we drafted like right before St. Patrick's Day, and the spring game was early March, right?
Yeah, it was early March.
So this would have been after the spring game. I'm not sure if our episode. I'm not sure if our episode had dropped yet at that point.
It might not have. Yet.
So Tyson Mobley. He had the the 60-yard catch, I think, to open up the spring game. So that
and then Clinton did have John Mattier as the quarterback too. He took Giovanni Lopez the round previous.
Yeah, so two high upside picks right there by Clint.
All right. Well, round 8 goes TJ Finley, quarterback, Western Kentucky. Landon Sides, wide receiver, North Texas. Juwan Newton, wide receiver, Toledo. Braden Bennett, running back, Coastal Carolina. Lewis Brown, wide receiver.
He's at San Diego State now.
He's at San Diego State. Justin Lockhart, wide receiver, San Jose State. Damon Ward, wide receiver, North Texas. Chase Sewell, wide receiver, ECU. Ethan Vasco, quarterback, Coastal Carolina. Logan Smothers, quarterback, Jackson State. Travion Rudolph, wide receiver, NIU, and Balin Brooks, wide receiver, South Dakota State.
San Diego
Not
State.
South Dakota, San Diego State. I almost messed up there with Travion Rudolph because of Felix Sharp always called him was it Randolph?
Travion Randolph.
Randolph. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm even reading this, and I just think of Travion Randolph ever since then. But yeah, what are your thoughts here in round 8? What do you think about Western Kentucky and TJ Finley? PJ took him at the top here in the 8th round. We kind of saw the struggles with Western Michigan, and then we got kind of a new coach. What was it the offensive coordinator? I'm trying to remember what
I think they did have new OC there. I think. But Caden Veltkamp returns. He had the big spring game, or I'm sorry, the big bowl game, and certainly, I would expect it's going to be a battle between those two. I think a lot of people just think it's going to be TJ Finley, but I'm not necessarily in that boat yet. I mean, I feel like Texas State wasn't entirely happy with Finley, right? But they didn't really have any other options. So I think it's probably more of a battle between Finley and Veltkamp than people are giving it credit for. And for me at this point, it'd be an avoid. And I also expect the offense to take a step back.
And at this point here in round 8, you're halfway through. You're kind of starting to pick at scraps. So at this point, I almost don't hate any pick.
Right.
And it's just like, hey, what's the best pick that you like there?
If I had to pick the one I like the most, probably Rudolph. The only thing I don't like about it is the quarterback, right? Rocky Lombardi is graduated out of eligibility, but I think it's a safe pick. He's their wide receiver 1. Some of these other guys can certainly outperform him. I'd say your pick is as a close second there, Chase Soule at East Carolina. But I think I'd give the nod to Rudolph. I feel like he's for sure the wide receiver 1 there at Northern Illinois. These other running or receivers that got taken this round are, we're reaching for the high upside guys, right? And we may not hit on any of them. I mean, you see 2 North Texas receivers go, right? And Landon Sides and Damon Ward. Jamori Macklin's gone, and so everybody's trying to find the next wide receiver 1 for North Texas. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we know who that is at this point. But Ward and Sides kind of seem to be the flavor of the month, if you will.
What are your thoughts now on Lewis Brown, on your Lewis Brown pick after kind of the news that kind of down there on the pecking order?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still early in spring camp. He's a talented guy. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how they plan to use him. I feel like he was primarily a slot guy there for Colorado State, but San Diego State brought in Jashawn Polk, who I think is clearly going to be at least start the season the slot receiver there for San Diego State. So, yeah, it can be interesting to kind of see how he's going to be used at San Diego State, and he may not even be a starter. But we know, history tells us that the outside guys for that San Diego State offense are kind of the ones that you want the most. And Balin Brooks is certainly one of those guys fighting for an outside spot. He was a freshman last year, got some high praise from that staff. And, he was, last we saw, he was running with the ones. So, yeah, just kind of pay attention to that San Diego State offense. I think if I had to do the pick over again, like today, I'm probably not picking Lewis Brown there.
Yeah, And then just, I don't know, a name that I saw that kind of triggered's probably not the right word, but just like brought back flashbacks of Braden Bennett, kind of a guy that got hyped up. I think it was 2 years ago, and then just like kind of, I think he missed a little bit of the season or something.
He
There was a
did. He
lot of
did.
hype
He
around
missed. He
him,
missed a lot of that year. C.J. Beasley was kind of the RB1.
and then he just hasn't done much. Didn't do much last year, which I'm not even sure if he had a game over 10 fantasy points. Like it was overall pretty disappointing. But a name that I saw that I'm like, oh, I had such high hopes for him. It was like I feel like it was 2 years ago, and just didn't happen.
Justin Lockhart, that's a pick. I think a lot of people forget about him. He got he missed all of last year with an arm injury, I believe it was. He's coming back now. Again, he's primarily been an outside guy, so don't know how they're going to use. They've got a lot of outside guys there at San Jose State, so not really sure if they're going to move somebody to the slot or what the plan is. But at this point in the draft, he's definitely worth the dart throw.
And I don't know how much information we're going to be able to glean from the spring practice reports, based off of just talk that we've kind of heard around San Jose State. Justice, you want to kind of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically they said the practices are closed, and then the ones that are open, they're telling the folks there that they don't really want them to kind of share any information in terms of who's running with the ones and who's running with the twos. So it's going to be hard to kind of get some information out of San Jose State this spring.
Yeah, so we do have them lined up, so it'll be interesting to see how that interview goes.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So round 9, we've got Cobb, wide receiver, Georgia Southern, Ty Thompson, quarterback Tulane, Bowden Grown, tight end Rice, Tanner Koziol, tight end Ball State, Michael Harrison, wide receiver / tight end San Diego State, Carlos Hernandez. I think that's a great pick there. Wide receiver Washington State, Naquan Wright, running backs South Florida, Zach Evans, the real Zach Evans, I think on the X, running back North Texas, transferring from Minnesota, Chuba Purdy, quarterback Nevada, Kenneth Womack, wide receiver Western Michigan, Alex, is it Texa, running back Navy, and then George Pettaway, running back JMU. This was a lot of goodness, I think, here. There's a lot of things I liked here.
There's quite a few. I mean, I like the 3 tight ends, right? That they are. I don't know if they were are those the next 3 tight ends. I know that Harold Fannin went earlier in the draft. Were those the next tight ends to go? The next 3? I would kind of expect that they probably were.
I will. While you're talking, I'll look up the draft order.
But like all 3 of those tight ends, E.J. Warner coming over to Rice, he liked the tight ends in Temple. Bowden Grown looked good last year when J.T. Daniels was at quarterback, and I expect him to have a great year with E.J. Warner at the helm. Tanner Koziol no longer has to share the limelight with Brady Hunt, who's moved on to North Carolina. A great pick there. Probably the biggest thing with Ball State is who's going to be the quarterback. And then your pick of Michael Harrison. He's someone that I could see being used as an outside receiver. He's tall, but he only weighs like 215 pounds. If you look at his height and weight, you would say the guys are an outside receiver, not a tight end. So he could become somewhat of a cheat code or a Tito, as our buddy Eric Froton calls him, where he's really being used as a receiver but has that tight end eligibility.
So yeah, those 3 tight ends were the next tight ends to go. So the first one, Fannin, you hit it right on the dot. That was 307, and then 903 is the next time a tight end goes, and we got 3 of them go in a row.
Yeah. If you're asking me, like I'd rather have these guys in the 9th round than Harold Fannin that early. So.
And then there's after this, and we'll go through all the rounds and whatnot. But then we've got 1 tight end, 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, 1 tight end, 1 tight end, and then it seems like just like redraft kicker, it's like everyone took their tight end at the very last round that we had.
Yeah. I like Jared's pick, Carlos Hernandez. Especially assuming that they remove him to the slot there at Washington State, right? Those slot receivers are the ones that tend to produce there in that Ben Arbuckle offense. Naquan Wright, South Florida. I think that's a great pick. Just kind of he's not going to wow you on a week to week basis, but he's going to get you 8 to 12 points.
Weeks.
Yeah, 8 to 12 points every week. Solid backup. My pick, Zach Evans. Coming down to North Texas, they lose a lot in that running back room, and so I'm hoping he can, be the next 1,000-yard rusher there for the Mean Green. And then we get to Chuba Purdy. I think he's got to be the favorite to start Nevada. Not quite sure what Nevada will look like when that new regime, but quarterbacks. Just overall, I feel like quarterbacks and running backs aren't as deep as what I thought they were going into this. Wide receiver seems to be much deeper, and I think you look at that draft board and you can kind of see it, right? A wide receiver like Kenneth Womack still available here in the 9th round, and we're taking the Navy fullback and George Pettaway, and so I mean, wide receiver is definitely deeper in the G5. The Kenny Womack pick, I mean, at this point, a great pick, but just not sure that offense is going to be, we've talked about before, be as productive, that they're going to run as many plays per game as they did last year with a new offensive coordinator. So,
and he was a guy that was just getting peppered with targets. Not necessarily, it was, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, but it was like, he got 10 receptions.
Oh, yeah.
70 yards.
He was, yes. His ADOT was pretty low, but he was getting a lot of targets. And then George Pettaway, that last pick, we talked about before with that offense and bringing over Dylan Morris from Washington, who we assume is going to be the starter there. And he just really doesn't fit the mold of what Chesney's done in the past at quarterback, because he's just not a very mobile option. In the past, Chesney quarterbacks are getting 1,400, 1,300, 1,100 yards rushing, and I don't see that happening for Dylan Morris. So that would lead me to believe that George Pettaway or Ayo Adeyi are going to kind of pick up the slack there. So maybe that two-headed monster at running back will pay off.
Yeah, and then I just want to kind of touch back on Womack, his last 5 games, target-wise, 19, 9, 16, 4, and 10. And then he had 14 receptions for 90 yards, 5 receptions for 50, 12 for 135, 2 for 24, and 8 for 44, and then 1 touchdown in that time frame. But from a 1-point PPR league, his fantasy points were 29, 10, 25.5, 4.4, and 12.4. So if that's your flex, that's a pretty nice boom bust flex. But yeah, almost kind of like what I'm kind of hoping, Elijah Metcalf type thing is there at. But it's already happened, so you don't really have to maybe project that. It's just, hey, you might take a step back, but a step back, not too bad.
Yep.
All right, last round here that we're going to talk about tonight. Sorry, I've been coughing a lot, so I've been putting myself on mute. We've got Alex Adams, wide receiver, Akron, Corey Rutgers, wide receiver, Arkansas State, Courtney Jackson, wide receiver, Arkansas State, Dante Wright, wide receiver, Temple, Dominic Mazzotti, tight end, UMass. Really like that pick there. Chris Hudson, wide receiver, Washington State. Hey, give me the Washington State wide receiver. That's what we're trying to find here. Tucker Gleason, quarterback, Toledo. Kind of an interesting guy there that I like. Amari Thomas, wide receiver, UAB. Jacob DeJesus, great pick at this point in the draft, wide receiver, UNLV. Keith Willis, running back, Louisiana Tech. Cartavius Norton, Iowa State transfer to Charlotte. And then Damian Taylor, running back at Troy. What do you think here about the 10th round, Justice?
I think you stole Amari Thomas.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear.
The police might be knocking on your door, trying to arrest you, man.
I couldn't believe he was still there. I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
That's yeah. I love that pick.
People might not be too familiar with Amari Thomas as he was a true freshman last year. Again, his last 5 games, 3 receptions for 28 yards, 6 receptions for 37, 4 for 33, 1 for 6, 4 for 10. He had 1 touchdown. His fantasy points are 5.8, 15.7, 7.3, 2, and 7. But for a true freshman, I feel like that's pretty darn good. And then targets. I'm a big believer in targets are earned, and he had 4, 6, 4, 2, and 5. So getting out there and getting the ball thrown his way is also a big thing. So I'm hoping that I've got that stack there with Zeno. Hopefully they throw the ball more, and he's the recipient of a lot more of those throws.
The Chris Hudson, that's a high upside pick there. He's he's a transfer coming over from Oregon. Could be a starting slot guy for them. Tucker Gleason. I mean, I think he performed admirably in the past, stepping in for DeQuan Finn. I like him as well. Those are
we kind of talked about it. We kind of talked about it off air some other time, but we were talking about Gleason, and if you think that I think you were saying like, oh, I hope that Gleason can get like a percentage of what Finn did at the rushing, but Finn actually didn't run for all that much. It was like 500 yards or 400 yards, something like. I mean, it is a lot, but it's
he's not rushing. He wasn't rushing for 1,000.
Yeah, it's like, but like I have that perception that he was running for way more than that, but he was getting like a rushing touchdown every single game. But yeah, I think Tucker Gleason could replicate that 500 yards. I don't want to say pretty easy, but like I'm not too concerned about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he can. You see the 2 Arkansas State receivers going off the board here. Courtney Jackson was the more productive receiver in terms of fantasy points. He had a lot more touchdowns than Corey Rucker. I think Corey Rucker, though, led them in yards and perhaps receptions.
So yeah, it was 7-2 in touchdowns.
But the thing about Rucker is you look at his targets and catches, like it's pretty bad. Like I don't know, like
36 receptions on 81 targets.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. And I didn't watch a lot of Arkansas State, so I don't know how much was bad throws, or was it just bad quarterback play, or was Corey Rucker just dropping balls? I don't really know the answer to that question, but you look at that ratio, that's not good.
36 receptions on 81 targets and 705 yards receiving. Wow. Like, think if he catches...
He could have caught some more balls.
Like, man, there's like a 1,500-yard season, like, in the making for Corey Rucker somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've seen it in the past, several years ago when he was at Arkansas State, the first time. So, both of those picks, I don't hate them.
And then Jackson was 39 receptions on 64 targets, 689, but then he had the 7 touchdowns.
Yeah, he had way more touchdowns than Courtney Jackson. Alex Adams didn't do much last year. Maybe he's due for a bounce back this year. We'll see if they can what they can get there as far as quarterback play at Akron.
They like to run the ball there, so I'm not too concerned about what kind of wide receiver you could pick up there. They like to run the ball.
Jacob DeJesus had some great games for UNLV. Obviously he's not wide receiver one with Ricky White, but hey, Ricky White gets hurt. Maybe DeJesus gets more balls, but yeah, in the 10th round, I don't like that pick. And then we see some running backs here just trying to take stabs, right? And guess who's going to be the next man up. I think Keith Willis has a good shot there at Louisiana Tech. UNC Charlotte, they in addition to Norton, they brought in is it Stokes from Michigan? Am I remembering his name correctly?
Yeah, I think
is it CJ Stokes?
Yeah, CJ Stokes.
They bring him over from Michigan, and then they had last year there was
with
Poggi. Biff.
Yep. So
like if I'm gonna take a guess, that's who I'm gonna take a guess on is CJ Stokes. But so they bring in Stokes from Michigan, Norton from Iowa State, and then there was and I forgive me for his name, but the dude, like I won't say the next to the last game, had like a monster game, like 200 and some yards for them last year. So they got
Charlotte.
Yeah. I want to say maybe his name was like last name was Washington or something, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But he had a monster game. It wasn't the last week. I believe it was the next to the last week. So you got to. I mean, just kind of want to see how spring's going to play out. We know Biff wants to run the ball, so it's certainly not a bad flyer to take on a UNC Charlotte running back. But I'm just not sure. At this point, we don't know. So you got to take a stab on somebody, right? So I can't blame them for taking a stab on Cartavius Norton.
I'm trying to look up. I don't know why it keeps going to ESPN. I do not like to use ESPN for this stuff.
And Damian Taylor there at Troy. Is he going to be the heir apparent to Kamani Vidal? Don't know. But it's definitely worth a shot at this point in the draft. I took tight end Dominic Mazzotti. I do like him for this year. I kind of feel like I wish I'd gotten one of those other 3 tight ends that went the round before, but Mazzotti I think is someone that could potentially perform as well, but probably a little bit more risk than those 3 guys that went in round 9. I want to say the guy's name was like Hashawn Washington.
Hashawn Wilson.
There we go.
24 carries, 198 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That was against Memphis in a 44-38 barn burner. And Charlotte, to say they struggled to score would be an understatement. And to put up 38 against Memphis, woof. Probably overlooking a team there.
But yeah, I mean, the Charlotte wants to run the ball, and so taking a stab on a Charlotte running back at this point in the draft certainly can't blame anyone for wanting to do that.
Nope, not at all. But that wraps up our rounds 6 through 10. This was a 15-round draft, so next week we'll be here for rounds 11 through 15. And
it's really deep, man, really deep. I would say I felt like really after round 10, things really dried up.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember even who I drafted at this like. Let's see here. Where am I?
We did this draft, like I said, middle of March, so it's been about 2 weeks or so since we finished.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot of dried up. A lot of names would be dart throws. So, but also good names to maybe be familiar with. There's a couple names in here that you see. It's like these are some solid picks here at the end. Like peek behind the curtain, Dubar or Breezy. They're at Boise State. They've you have Ashton there, but then you have Halani that leaves. So how much is he going to get? A word on the street is they're thinking about 10 to 12 touches a game, which he's a pretty electric player when he gets the ball in his hands, so that might be enough. And then he's one injury away, just like anybody is in this violent game of football with two gladiators coming up to each other and just wanting to tear each other apart. So you're always one play away. So, but yeah, we'll get into rounds 10 through 15, so there'll be a lot of names that you might not be familiar with if you don't follow a lot of G5 football. And honestly, if you do follow a lot of G5 football, there still might be some names you're like, I didn't even know that player existed. I think at even a point, I drafted a guy and Justice like, is he out of eligibility? I'm like, well, I don't see that he's not. And you kind of go through all the the whose line is anyway. The eligibility doesn't matter. It's all made up. Theoretically, if you follow everything with the red shirt, medical red shirt, COVID year, like they've been in school for like 4 or 5 years and they're like a sophomore. So anyways, that will do it for us tonight.
If you're
like Justice said, on Friday, we have our next Worker Bee series dropping. You said that was at 8 a.m. Eastern time.
8 a.m. Eastern time, Friday morning. Yep.
And then we've got another one scheduled this week. So tune in for that. We also have an interview coming up in a couple weeks with the 2023 Jim Thorpe Award winner. So tune in for that talk. There'll be, how is it like to get prepared for Pro Day? I'm going to ask a question about like, hey, how do you cover like Travis Kelce versus Justin Jefferson? Like, what's your mindset of like what you would have to do to like cover those? Because they're two drastically different types, of people. So like, how do you cover something like that? But yeah, if you want a little peek behind the curtain of what it's like to get ready for the NFL draft, we're gonna have some questions for a couple guys here at Air Force.
And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave those 5-star reviews for us and rate the show. We appreciate the support everyone has, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.